Minister Senzo Mchunu was on Parliament's ad hoc committee's hot seat this week, defending his decision to disband the much talked about political killings task team. Mkhwanazi told the committee that he had the authority to disband the team, adding that it was a necessary operational decision to redirect resources in order to serve the whole nation and not a select group. Mkhwanazi's testimony followed that of Deputy National Police Commissioner for Crime Detection, Lieutenant General Shadrack, who is also alleged to have colluded with crime syndicates and to have derailed criminal investigations. Sibiya denied the allegations, saying that Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi, who made the allegations, was misleading the nation. Sibiya asserted that his relationships with controversial figures were for intelligence gathering purposes and that the accusations against him are part of a smear campaign. He further claimed that the political killings task team was already ineffective and plagued by corruption before its disbandment. More on this, we are joined by political analyst Asana Ngwasheng and security expert Professor Kulufelo Rakubu. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. Really do appreciate it. I think perhaps to start the conversation here, and it's around the political killings task team. We heard a great deal of testimony from suspended Minister Senzo Mchunu, and I want you to have a listen to what he had to say about his decision to disband the political killings task team. Have a listen at this. That clip ready for you where Minister Mchunu defends his decision to disband the political killings task team. I want to perhaps start the conversation with you, Asanda. How important is it that he was able to give clear and definitive answers about the rationale behind that decision? And do you think we've gotten that over the last 2 days?
Thank you so much for having me. I think that, it's important to be clear, firstly, on the jurisdiction and what each of the two commissions effectively supposed to do. The Judicial Commission has a much broader spec and is able to have legal and other implications, while the ad hoc committee is there to actually check on the allegations that were made and the implication of members of parliament and accusations that there was ethical breach in terms of revealing classified information that shouldn't have been released by both a DA member and a member of the National Coloured Congress. And so this commission needed to understand from the former police minister what decision was taken and how the decision was taken, contrary to what Mkhwanazi and others who have backed up his story have said. And I don't feel like Senzo Mchunu was able to answer clearly. In fact, he actually went back and forth and made one statement the one day and another statement the next day in trying to explain what happened, saying that, at some point that no, by the time he got there, the decision was made, and then saying no, he actually did, he did consult widely, and then coming back and saying no, the decision was made. So there's a lot of backing and forthing and contradictory information that's coming out, which makes him not a credible witness or a credible person presenting to this. And I think that, what concerns me about how the ad hoc committee has been done is that it's become a political football with the MK trying to pin down Cyril Ramaphosa and asking Mkhwanazi, for instance, questions he can't answer.
Asana, I'm going to pause you there because I do want us to come to the political theatre that we see playing out there a little bit later on in the conversation. I want to focus specifically on this political killings task team and the adjudication around the evidence and testimony there so far. In fact, let's have a listen at this clip of Minister Mchunu explaining his rationale behind the disbandment of the task team, telling us that he seemingly had the authority to do so. Let's have a listen.
It's a decision I took, and I'm responsible for it, and I stand by it. Let's not look for some people who are in the corner. I believe very strongly that the Constitution of the Republic allows the minister, or that the minister has power to take the decision that I took.
Professor Rakubu, you're a criminal analyst, you're a crime analyst. You specialize in understanding the Police Act to the letter. Does the Constitution and the South African Police Services Act really empower the minister to make that type of decision specifically?
From what I could pick, indeed, the Constitution does provide powers for the minister to take particular decision. Section 206, 207, and 205 clearly specifies what a national commissioner can do, which powers lies with the provincial commissioner, and which one lies with the minister. But it is very particular when it comes to consultation. You do not take powers in the absence of the other, because in section 11 it contains the powers of the national commissioner, and now section 12 subsection 2b specifies powers of the provincial commissioner. Now, decisions cannot be taken in the absence of the other when such decision impact on the functionality of the other. So in this case, I felt that the minister was boldly highlighting his misunderstanding or his misinterpretation or issues around the constitutional power struggle. It might be that he misinterpreted, he misunderstood due to power dynamics, because if you listened to him, he boldly highlighted this was a political structure. Why are you questioning the political disbandment? Because him and him alone took that decision, misinformed decision, coming into that particular position for a small period of time and take such a decision. And from his testimony, he tried to drag a work study, which I don't think he had a full understanding of the purpose of that work study. The work study was not critically meant for tax team. It was inclusive of other crimes, your gang violence or gangsterism and so forth. But then he relied on it to come and push for a procedural position to say I was advised according to this work study, which I still question the scientific rigor, which I also still question the methodology adopted, and again still interested in who commissioned it to manage the biasness. Yeah, so constitutionally, he has powers, but to a greater extent, you have to consult. But he boldly agreed that he did not, and he did not see the need to specifically call a meeting to specifically address issues of task team. He says they were discussed in the midst of others, meaning it was not important, according to him, to call in a meeting wherein clearly and strictly the agenda will focus on the political task team. He did not do so.
Kulefelo, let's string together some of those pieces of evidence chronologically, because I do think chronology matters here to a great extent. We hear of this work study that had a organogram of the South African Police Service organizationally painted out there, and that organogram did not include a specialized task team like the political killings task team, which meant he interprets it that it was meant to be done away with. This is a work study from March 2024, long before the 7th administration came into power and before Senzo Mchunu was the Minister of Police. And then we hear of a meeting that happened on the 1st of November. In this meeting, present in it was a bunch of other generals, but importantly was the Minister of Police himself and the National Commissioner, Fani Masimula. Excluded from this meeting was General Khumalo, who is the project manager of the political killings task team in KZN, as well as the provincial commissioner, Lieutenant Mkhwanazi. And in there, we hear from Minister Mchunu that a decision was made to disband the political killings task team and that the national commissioner agreed with him. And then we have that letter of the 31st of December where the word immediately became contentious because he requested for the immediate disbandment. So that's the chronology that we have. And then yesterday we heard parenthetically that Vusi Pikoli had provided legal advice to him on the disbandment of the political killings task team, and that's the strength of it, and that he had informed the president and that the president agreed with him. Now, given how that chronology played out, where are some of the specific gaps for you in how the decision should be tied together, given that he says there was a work study, there was a meeting, there was legal advice, and I informed the president, he agreed with me, and I had a meeting with the minister, with the national commissioner, and he agreed with me. It seems to me he thinks that was sufficient.
Yeah, he does think that was sufficient. First, work study, a year in which work study was conducted. There's a 2019 mentioned there, and there's no way you can come in and present finding of a 2019 study, particularly when it comes to issues of violence, because crime evolves on a daily basis. The way crime was in 2019 might not be the way it was in 2024. And again, to say he consulted with, he agreed, or in a meeting, the National Commissioner agreed. We do not have such evidence as to whether it was in agreement or it looked like there would be further discussions around how this task team is going to be disbanded, and critical figures would still be then be invited to that meeting to corroborate or to discuss issues pertaining to the disbandment. Then the timing of the letter as well is questionable, because now there seems to be secrecy around that timing. You know, the National Commissioner is on leave, yet you write a letter that specifies immediately. And in the criminology space or crime sphere, the minute is immediate. Immediate means stop. Even when the police officers are stopping you, they tell you to stop immediately. You do not think twice or look the other way. You halt. You don't proceed with investigations. So now, imagine being informed to stop immediately when you're dealing with such complex investigations, complex issues that involves whistleblowers protection, complex that deals with cartels that are highly dangerous or highly armed. What is the nature of immediately? So, but now he did not win in justifying that immediately, because the minute he writes a letter to say immediately, there should have been a subsequent, or that letter should be accompanied by a tangible or thorough specific plan that talks to all issues pertaining to even the commissioner's protection, for example, because you understand the complicity of political killings in KwaZulu-Natal. And remember, by the time the unit was the task team was interprovincial, and that does not mean you can't be saying immediately. Did you look at the processes or outstanding activities in the dockets? What if immediately means that today we are supposed to arrest? But then when you say immediately, interpretation is that do not even arrest, do not even tap a particular phone, do not even analyze a particular finding. So that is the meaning of investigate immediately in my context.
Yeah. Asanda, a great deal of the justification that we heard from Senzo Mchunu was around resource management, saying that the political killings task team was hogging resources in a specific way that wasn't optimally beneficial to everybody. And so the disbandment is to free up some of those resources so that we can fight other crimes with those resources. And ministers are allowed to make policy decisions based on resource management, right? It's quite literally at the center of policy decision making. It's about a resource economy. But however, was that convincing enough for you that it was a sufficient and correct rationale behind the disbandment of the political killings task team, notwithstanding the procedurally how we went about doing it?
Well, I think, this is a very important question, because first of all, why is it important that a political task team would have to be set up in order to investigate the killings of politicians? This is critical because the killing of politicians means that you are interrupting democracy, wherein South Africans or people in a province or a ward will vote for a particular individual. Another individual will interrupt the democracy and go and get that person who has been duly elected killed in order for them to take up that position. And so the killing of politicians is actually a threat to our democracy as South Africans, which makes it a higher priority than the killing of an ordinary South African. So while in law we are all equal and all deaths are equally egregious and need to be dealt with, the killing of a politician is not just a death of an individual. It actually has an impact on the democratic system. And if we allow South Africa to become a country where if you want to be in power, we simply kill the incumbent. We are creating an enterprise and a country where there is no democracy and where criminals are essentially, and murderers, in fact, are essentially running the country. And so I was not convinced at all by his statements. And I want to add a piece here which says, I was actually quite interested in how he responded, because the same minister in September of 2017, when he was the chairman in KZN, when he was the chairman, the removed chairman and the premier of KZN, the same Senzo Mchunu said that political killings were a serious issue that needed to be dealt with. He himself even made the comment that in Limpopo, they solve problems by using muti. In KZN, they solve problems by killing. And he, in fact, said that the ANC as a political party was part of the problem. This is something that you can go and look into. He was saying and making these statements at the Murana Commission. So how do we get Senzo Mchunu in 2017 saying political killings are important to be looked at, that they actually undermine our democracy and are a critical issue that needs to be dealt with, when he's the premier of KZN, but suddenly when he becomes the actual minister of the police in charge of making a decision about not only whether the task force continues or is disbanded, but how it conducts its business, he says it's not worth it. So there's a serious discrepancy in his own logic, because in 2017 he thought it was critical and was important, and suddenly in 2025 he says it's not important. So the question I'm left with is why was it suddenly not important to deal with this issue that undermines our democracy and actually makes a mockery of the voting system of this country?
I'd be curious to know if members of the committee will cross-question him on that inconsistency. Both General Sibiya and Minister Mchunu appeared before the ad hoc committee this week, and they were both asked about their alleged ties to the criminal underworld. I want you to have a listen to what both Minister Mchunu said and General Sibiya about denying any allegations around their relationship with criminals and those in the criminal underworld. Have a listen at this.
I have nothing to do with criminal syndicates myself. I've never had anything to do with them in my life. Not once. And not amper. Not amper. It has never happened. And it will never happen. General Mkhwanazi knows in his conscience that I'm not a criminal. That I have nothing to do with criminal syndicates.
I know him as an activist in Northwest, but I didn't know him. I also Googled him, and he also contacted me. Remember that he would also collect some information there around there, what is going on, whether be it the tender-related corruptions there or concerns that he had. And then also he ended up also aiding the fact that, look, I just also want to warn you that you must know that the intelligence people are working on you. You know Vusi Matlala as a service provider of the South African Police Service. He's well known in the South African Police because he was at the time running a hospital at a SABC college.
Yeah, so Vusi Matlala and his seemingly political intermediary, Brown Mokgotsi, were at the center of this. Do you think that the testimony from both of them are going to be crucial in tying Khulufelo, both Sibiya and Mchunu, to the underworld, or do you think this is one of those superfluous, inconsequential parts of the questioning?
For me, the Sibiya one was very interesting. At some point, he was trying to know someone. At some point, he met the other less than 5 times to justify that there could not be anything sinister discussed when you meet less than 5 times. And again, to say I benefited intelligence information from them. He did not have any answer for South Africans to justify the association. So with that, it's clearer that there is linkage, there is association. And remember, the Madlanga Commission also is still untapping or tapping into these relations where there's exchange of WhatsApps and here and there. But then Mkhwanazi was very political in the answer, which will obviously throw Sibiya under the bus. Mkhwanazi is denying as he tries to present himself as a reformer. So he doesn't have. So meaning it is up to the commission or the committee to dig deeper to verify these linkages, to what extent, and that information will probably come out of the other interested potential witnesses. The Mkhwanazi himself might have to come and explain how he got hold of the intelligence information or information that he was not supposed to have. So it's still a long way to verify whether there was linkage, but it looks like there were linkages due to the nature of decisions, the secrecy around information, and the rush or the harshness in the disbanding or disbandment of a very critical team. So the commission or the committee will have to assist us in that regard.
Asanda, is Brown Mkhwanazi, a real political broker that could compromise Mkhwanazi, or is he a chance taker?
He was playing demons, yes.
Sorry, Asanda, yes?
I think that Brown Mkhwanazi is a very interesting character because he implicates various people, right? And he actually shows the break in responsibility and custodianship of the very office of the police ministry. So when you are dealing with police matters, and I think issues of government in general, there's certain classified information that is only to be known by individuals who have certain levels of clearance. So it's still not clear what level of clearance Brown Mkhwanazi had. It's still not clear what level of clearance Vusumuzi had and all the other people who are implicated, given the kind of information that they were receiving from various people, the minister and others around him. It is actually, to me, or to my mind, it's quite clear that there was a breach of ethics. So before we even get to whether there's corruption or not, there was a clear breach of ethics wherein individuals who did not have a right legally to have information were furnished with information and influenced decisions by a political principal who himself had limited powers that he abused based on what we are hearing. And I think, there's a point that Prof. Kulufelo made earlier about understanding or misunderstanding constitutional mandates and how far a minister's powers go. And I think what's becoming clear, particularly in this era, is that African National Congress ministers do not actually understand the Constitution and the kinds of powers that they have. We're seeing this with Mkhwanazi and his articulation of how he came to the decision and the powers he thinks he has. We're seeing this with the Minister of Social Development and her decisions around the DG, around the hiring of the Chief of Staff, and the various other scandals that are coming. And I could probably give you at least 10 more examples of where we are seeing this, where African National Congress ministers have failed continuously in understanding their responsibility. And in fact, what they are also showing us is that in our government,
that limitation
in
itself
our government, there are breaches.
That limitation itself will be a policy and legislative question that the committee as lawmakers will have to address. But unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave it there. Kulufelo Rakubu, thank you so much for your time, Prof. Really do appreciate it. Asana Ngwasheng, thank you so much for your insights. Really do appreciate it. I do also want to note that I spoke to Brown Mkhwanazi on Thursday evening here on SABC News, and he told me that he does indeed have clearance to access classified crime intelligence information. He told me, I am not Madlanga, so he will not tell me what the source of that authority is, but he will tell the committee. So we're going to have to leave it there for now. Thank you so much for your time, ladies. Appreciate it. We're going to take a short break. We continue on the other side of this.